Mike Wilson here, the host of the Stutter with Confidence podcast, and I'm happy today to be joined by Mr. Stephen Greene. And Stephen, welcome. And if you would, tell people where you live and what you do.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for the opportunity of coming on your podcast. So I'm Stephen Greene. I am a person who stutters, and I'm from Dublin in Ireland, but I am living down on the south coast in a city called Waterford. I work in the area of social care, so I work as a social care worker for people with intellectual disabilities, and I've been doing that for about 20 years now. So yeah, it's a job I'm very passionate about doing anyway. So.
And out of curiosity, before we sort of jump into the arc of your stuttering journey, did the fact that you were a person that stutters influence at all and sort of draw you to that type of social work?
I am not sure really, because I would have done various different jobs when I was younger. I had a sister that was working in services back 20 years ago, and I was looking for a change in the job that I was doing. And then she had said to me, would you be interested in maybe doing this kind of work? So then that was how I actually got into the field, and that was when I realised that that was the work that I wanted to be doing. So yeah, so it all worked out well. So.
Sounds good. And so Stephen, are you like many of us folks who stutter? You got some pretty challenging memories surrounding your stutter from childhood, and if so, would you maybe share one or two of those memories that stick out as the some of the toughest or some of the tougher moments of your experience as a person who stutters?
Yeah, I suppose like my childhood actually was pretty good. Like my memories, I remember the difficulty would have been having to speak up in class. And so yeah, basically you're kind of counting the people just before it comes to your turn, and all of the anxiety is starting to build up. So I suppose I kind of would have had that pressure and so on. But I had quite a good social mix of friends, and I never really felt the isolation and so on when it came to my stuttering in my childhood. I think it was more in my early adulthood, and maybe in my 20s that I really felt the kind of hardship when it came to my stuttering. I suppose like when I left school and looking for a job, it was a nightmare at the start, because I didn't decide to go to college at that stage. So I was applying for various different jobs, and my confidence was like I was doing everything to try. I was doing everything to try not to stutter, which was causing me to stutter more. And so I would have done a lot of the holding back and the avoidance behaviors. And like looking for a job was such a struggle, because even the simple things of dropping a CV into a company, and then you're actually going in and you're having that face to face with the first person that you meet, and you're just blocking on nearly every word, and then you kind of leave that situation and you just feel really like you just feel that you want the ground to open up and to just swallow you at that time anyway, you know. So I suppose, yeah, then that would have been quite a struggle for me when I left school first. And later on then, I think what happened was I seemed to bury my head in the sand when it came to my stuttering. Now look, I had a great set of friends. I had a partner, but when it came to my stuttering, I still had all of the avoidance behaviors that were happening and so on. And I suppose a couple of really challenging times would have been when my father passed away when I was quite young. So I think I was 25, 26 at the time. I think my father was 47. And he had passed there suddenly, and I really wanted to say a prayer during the mass service, but I just kept on kind of holding myself back, and I felt so bad after that because like I really wanted to celebrate my father's life and so on, and just to be part of that ceremony that was happening in the church. But due to my avoidance behaviors and holding back, it is something that I didn't actually do. So actually that was hard at the time then also, you know. Now, and I suppose just later on then, I would have been in my late 20s, and now things were going very well in work and so on. Work was going well, but it was still the elephant in the room that nobody was talking about, you know. So I would have been doing a lot of word substitution and a lot of avoidance behaviors. And I had this one situation that happened in work was, so my manager was off on annual leave at the time, and I was left in charge of the centre. So this actually would have been a day service for people with intellectual disabilities, and there was probably about eight staff that was working there, and then I was left in charge of the team. And I remember that the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and I was about to say the name of the centre, which was Port Centre, but then did my block on the word solace, so I just got a silent block, and then I went into the repetitions then, so it was like so. And the person that was on the other end of the line said, "Oh, sorry, could I please speak to one of the staff there?" You know, so this person had made the poor assumption that they were speaking to a person with an intellectual disability anyway. So I was able to gain my composure and say, actually, you're speaking to the acting manager here anyway. So is there anything that I can help you with anyway? And I suppose that was the catalyst for me to say, look, you really have to go and do something about your speech now. Look, even though work is going well and everything, but if you look at maybe all of the avoidances that you are doing and the struggling that you're doing with your speech. So I think that was the catalyst for me to go on my stuttering journey, Michael.
Gotcha. And so, and what exactly was the catalyst? Was it that that the person at first had confused you for, for one of the folks that was intellectually disabled, or was it the fact that you had not sort of slunk away from the moment, but you stepped forward and said, no, this is actually the acting manager, and that gave you a sense of confidence that that you can sort of stand up for yourself and say what needs to be said, in a sense that I can move forward on this journey. I don't have to be sort of holding back and not speaking, what I want to say.
Yeah, I definitely think it was maybe a bit of both, Michael. So it was the fact that I was shocked to think that somebody was making this judgment about me on actually just the way that I spoke. And but also, yeah, as you said, that I had the resilience to actually say, well, actually, sorry, you are speaking to the acting manager here. So yeah, no, it's definitely a bit of both that made me decide to go and do something just about my stuff.
Gotcha. And so what was that action that you took? What was that sort of next phase in the journey?
Yeah, so I think this was a very important stage for me, because so I kind of went out and I looked to see what information was out there in relation to stammering in Dublin. So I would have been living in Dublin at the time, and I found that there was a support group that was up and running for people who stuttered, and it was a face-to-face meeting format to the group. So I attended the first meeting, and now it took me some time to build up the courage to even go to the first meeting, because I was like, okay, what am I what am I going to meet here, and is my sensitivity going to be really high as well, because like I've always never been around other people who had stuttered, and my tolerance for my own fluency, it was pretty low anyway, So so I went to the first meeting, and it was just a breath of fresh air. I actually met these people that were openly talking about their stuttering, and I just felt really welcome, and I felt that this was a place that I needed to be. And yeah, so it was just really so kind of that was the start of my journey then, because just from attending this support group, I ended up just kind of finding out more just about this whole stuttering thing and how I felt about my own stuttering. And then I was able to find out about a therapy course that I did in 2006. So the therapy course, it was called Dublin Adult Stuttering, and it was a 7-day residential course that was run by 3 speech and language therapists out of Dublin. And it was a group course, so I think there was 8 people that went on the course, and we actually got to stay in a hotel for 7 days, and we were in just this big speech bubble. It was just like all about stuttering. And the course was based on the principles of Joseph Sheehan. So it would have been all about openly stuttering and the avoidance reduction. And it also covered the Charles Van Riper as well. So the stuttering modification and so on. So, and this just kind of blew my mind, really, so it just like, I was there, okay, I am actually being given the permission to stutter here, and I've been told it's actually okay to stutter, and in order for me to move forward with my speech and with my life, this is what I need to do to strip away all of the avoidance behaviors that I had been doing for the last many years. So I definitely have a lot to be thankful for from the fellow participants on the course, and also to the 3 speech and language therapists then that ran the course, because from their passion for stuttering, it was just infectious. So it was just, yeah, it was brilliant.
Well, and also to Joseph Sheehan and Charles Van Riper, right, who had groundwork for it. Yeah, and that's so key. I mean, you know, any program, I don't want to say any because there might be random examples where somebody's helped by other types of things, but it seems to me it's so crucial to take that step where we get to the point where we're just not going to run away from stuttering anymore, right? We're going to say what we want to say and basically get desensitized to, whatever the world may have in store for us because we stutter. And as it turns out, it's actually far less harsh than most of us imagined it would be, right? When we say what we want, and I'm a big fan, and I know Sheehan and probably Van Riper, I don't know for sure on this, but I know Sheehan was big on eye contact. And that's something that really helped change my journey. And when I was 18, my freshman year, first year at Florida State University, they brought me around campus that whole first semester, introduced no speech techniques whatsoever, just made me ask people questions and learn to keep eye contact when I'm stuttering rather than doing that, do that. And it was revolutionary for me to realize that most people would just sit there and listen and they'd answer my question like they didn't even care that I stuttered. It was like, I thought, like the skies were going to open up and a lightning bolt was going to strike me dead if I just went out and stuttered openly.
It's one of the speech therapists that was on the course. He was saying to me, Stephen, I am hoping to get you to the stage where you will be able to scoff at fluency. What I mean? It's and then I think that's the biggest thing for me, Michael, was changing how I felt about my stuttering. So from changing the feelings of shame, guilt, and so on, and having a tolerance for my disfluencies. So when they happen, they just happen, and that I don't get the panic at the moment of a block or at the moment of repetition, and that this is part of my speech. And because one of my favorite Sheen quotes is, if you're stuttering as an adult, you don't really have a choice as in whether you are going to stutter. You have a choice as in how you are going to stutter. And I think he really kind of hit a nail on the head there anyway, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's obviously a paradoxical thing with stuttering, because for many of us, when you do get, desensitized and get yourself to the point where you're not avoiding and where you're not obsessed with your fluency or lack thereof, by getting to that point, it actually oftentimes will moderate the severity of the stuttering by itself, because you're just not feel like you're walking on eggshells. And and conversely, I think it's a quote from Wendell Johnson, right, where he said, stuttering is what we do when we're trying not to stutter. Now that isn't 100%, encapsulating everything that's going on, but certainly that effect for many of us is powerful, right? The more you want not to stutter, the more you're, God, I hope I'm going to be fluent here, the less likely you are to be fluent, right?
Yeah. Yes, and even like, because like Sheen was never against being fluent. Sheen didn't really want people to get a false sense of fluency, So false sense of fluency is where you're still using your tricks and you're trying to get that fluency, whereas like Sheen was all about just being open about your stuttering, and maybe your fluency is a byproduct of your acceptance of your stuttering.
Mm.
Yeah, so I have to say, really, the kind of Sheen stuff really spoke to me as a person. Actually, I have quite a funny story. Because we got the opportunity to watch some of the Sheen videos during the evening time, whilst we were on the course, and then I was really struck then just by the Sheen stuff. So when I finished on the course, then I was back at home the following week, and so this would have been back in 2005 or 2006 anyway. So I kind of went home, and I actually looked up the phone number for Vivian Sheen, because Vivian would have been on some of the videos then that we watched anyway. So I just looked up, and I managed to get her phone number, and I phoned her to just thank herself and just the work that herself and Joe did in relation to helping people who stuttered. And now it was a mad, because she took the phone call, and then she was probably wondering, who the hell is this guy that's ringing me from Dublin, Ireland? Anyway, like. And then this guy with a funny accent or something. Anyway, so but she was so nice on the phone, and I was so gracious that I actually got the chance to talk to Vivian, and she was very accommodating just with her time and so on. So yes, then that was definitely a precious memory I have in relation to stuttering then as well.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I'm sure she wasn't that shocked, because her and Joseph understood the shackles or the prison that people that stutter can be living in, and that that when they step out of that and get out of the comfort zone with consistency, and that it's revolutionary. I mean, in one's life, and that combination of that, getting that, intensive training on non-avoidance, and really understanding sort of the what feeds the stuttering wolf, as I like to call it. What feeds the tyrant that can ruin our life, and to stop feeding it by stop avoiding. And I mean, this is a somewhat direct way of saying it, but for me, this is how it was. And I sort of think this runs pretty consistently in a lot of people's experience. It's the process of going from a scared little boy when it comes to our stutter, or a scared little girl, to a man or woman, where we say, look, it is what it is. I didn't ask for the stutter. I didn't want it, but I got it. And I'm not going to let that, shut me up for the rest of my life. Like, I'm still free to say what I want to say. And I can totally say what I want to say. It might take me longer, but I can say it. And realizing that the vast majority of other people, once they know what's going on, if we're determined to say what we want to say, they'll stay with us and they'll listen, and the communication will happen, right? And what's the whole point of talking? It's to communicate. It's not to win some fluency contest. Nobody gets awards for being the most fluent person in the room. 99% of the people don't stutter. By definition, anything that 99% of people can do is not special. It's not unique, right? Now, to us, historically, it was, we were craving it. But I agree with you. When you stop craving fluency, and there's another quote from Sheehan that I read that was really good. He said, when the stutterer, that phrase "person that stutters" wasn't around in Sheehan's day, but when the stutterer realizes that fluency is not bringing them anything special, or disfluency is not bringing them anything that horrible, when they realize that, it's a game changer in people's life,
Oh yeah, because I think I posted that recently on one of the stuttering groups, Michael. I think you maybe saw it when I posted up a picture of Sheen, and I put up, your stuttering doesn't hurt you and your fluency doesn't do you any good. And it was funny some of the reaction that I got, because like so many people were like, this is crazy, like, what do you mean that your stuttering doesn't do you? What you mean that your stuttering doesn't hurt you? But like, it is the kind of realization, it's everything you're doing to try not to stutter is hurting you, like, what I mean? So, and I think that's the point of trying to get across just to people also, whereas kind of people were saying, oh, what do you mean your stuttering doesn't hurt you, like, and your fluency doesn't do you any good. So, like, and I love the way Sheen's stuff, it has stood the test of time, like, what I mean? Like, if you think about the stuff that he was saying kind of back in the 60s and so on, like, it's still so relevant now, in speech circles anyway. So.
Absolutely. And, going back to those early folks at the University of Iowa also, which was the 1930s, even with Van Riper and Johnson was around then, and Bringleson, I think, was another one. But, they got it too, as far as, well, for example, I heard this from a friend of mine who's a student in a speech language pathology program at Michigan State. She said she learned in her program that in the 1930s, Van Riper and those guys had their and they were people that stuttered also. Johnson, Van Riper, Sheehan, right, were all people that stuttered. So they, had experienced the below the surface portions of the iceberg, so really understood that side of it. But they, at the University of Iowa in the 1930s, apparently they had their, folks that stutter, students going out and talking to so many people in the little town there in Iowa that the business owners eventually went to the mayor and said, "You got to stop these stutterers. There's too many of them. They're coming into my shop too much." So they, and obviously, as we all know, that's very valuable to, push ourselves out there, and where we can go out and stutter and in front of anybody and talk in front of anybody. And that, so that was the 1930s, right? And it's a shame, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, but it's a shame that the fluency craze took over the speech therapy profession in like the 1970s or so. And for a lot of people that came along like me in the 1980s and most of the 1990s getting therapy, most of it was all fluency focused. And, oh, well, let me teach you this technique here in the clinic and then go out and use it. And it's really a shame. I mean, most professions don't regress. They don't get worse over the decades. They get better. And I will, the speech therapy world, at least the folks at the top of it nowadays are very much, going back to a lot of those key principles from Sheehan and Van Riper and that sort of thing. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They had a lot of stuff figured out a long time ago, and I wish we would have just stayed on that course instead of getting sidetracked with this sort of getting drunk on the idea of fluency. Oh, we can just teach them a technique, and because it works in the clinic with me, it must be working in the real world. So I'm doing a good job. Let me pat myself on the back as a therapist,
Well, look, I think there's plenty of hope, because if you see some of the experts in the field at the moment, like I got the chance to speak to Dr. Scott Yaris and to Yuri Schreider and to a few of the others. Like, these guys just totally get it, like, and I suppose the conversation is then, like, how do we as a community, how do we get everybody working together? So you have your SLPs, your SLTs, people in the stuttering community, so people who stutter, families, and so on. So how can we move things on then? So obviously, I think there's work to be done with regard to the teaching of speech and language pathologists and therapists, and maybe the amount of hours that is covered on stuttering that they do in colleges and actually university. And also, I think that there needs to be more of the students, that they get to meet people who stutter then also, so, and then I am not just talking about just the kind of people that would go and give talks to students, because kind of basically they are the people that are further on down the journey in relation to their stuttering. I'm kind of talking about the people you will meet at a support group. So maybe you might meet somebody that's struggling quite a lot with their speech. And then these are the people that the students will be meeting when they are working as a therapist in a situation, like, So, and I think maybe there needs to be a conversation on how can we get them to actually link in better then anyway, like, so. And also, I think there has to be a conversation on, if you think about the various different programs that are out there being run by maybe just by people who stutter then as well. So you have your stuttering coaches that are out there working with people who stutter, and you have your programs then that are run by people who stutter then as well. So where do they fit into the picture then? So like, are these programs happening because there's something lacking in the speech and language side of things then, or what is happening there then anyway, like? And I think when it comes to these programs, because like you will have some of these programs that they might charge up to 3,000 or 4,000 euros then, pounds or dollars, and it's maybe from 1,000 to 3,000 or 4,000 dollars to go on a certain program. So, but how do you measure the outcomes of these programs then? So say if I'm going in as an end user and I want to pick out a program that I want to go and work on my stuttering on. Now, obviously, I will have to be mindful, am I going on a fluency shaping program? And am I going on an acceptance kind of program then, or there maybe is a combination of both then. But also I need to be able to see what are the outcomes of these programs. So I think that these programs need to be independently verified. So so I see that they need to be able to show maybe are they a cost benefit for the end user then as well. Anyways.
I agree with that 100%. And right now, I don't think any such thing exists, right? There's no place for the person that stutters that can go and get, well, especially peer-reviewed, published from, respected, scientists and medical professionals to see what the outcome is of these various programs. Almost all of them have their own internal success numbers, but like Hollins, for example, in Virginia, which is one of the more famous ones, is like 92% of people are fluent at the end of the program, and 75% are still fluent a year later, or whatever their numbers are. And I went to Hollins. I know a lot of people that went there. I've seen no indication that those are actually the success numbers, but in fairness, everybody's got an interest in their own program. So they're not going to be fair and balanced, even if they want to be. They're biased, right, towards their own program, and they want to believe in what they're doing, which is understandable. But I'd love to see that, on an international level, a group of respected researchers say, look, and there's so much research. The week before last, from the time we're recording this, I was at the Friends conference, and in one of the panel discussions, this came up that I think it was Dr. Eric Jackson from NYU that was saying this, that, there's a lot of research on stuttering that people that stutter look at and they're like, well, what does that have to do with me? How's that going to benefit me in my journey? Right. And now this is me talking, but what I'd love to see is some sort of a central place evaluated in a consistent way, both the below the surface of the iceberg stuff, the shame, embarrassment, avoidance, what kind of actual impact stuttering's having on the person's life, and on some of the above the iceberg stuff, for folks that are wanting that. And, no one's against that. No one's against struggling less, I don't think. But something objective, third party, where everybody's being evaluated on the same sort of metrics in an objective way, so the person that stutters can go somewhere centrally and say, okay, these are the different programs, these are the results from an objective standpoint. This is the cost, this is the time commitment, this is the amount of work, et cetera, and actually make informed choices rather than where we're at now, still in 2021. You're just like, shooting bullets in the dark, trying to figure out what might help you. For most people, you can do research, but it's hard to, it's just hard to know where you're supposed to go, what the heck you're supposed to do.
And also, Mike, I think it's very important. So if a person has a complaint to make about maybe a therapeutic situation then that they're in, okay? So if they're working with a SLT or a SLP, they obviously have a body that they can go to, they can send a complaint in, and so on. Right? But if somebody's on one of these programs, and then if they have a complaint that they're putting in, where does that go, and who investigates that? So what protections are in place for the person who stutters that maybe feels that something hasn't actually gone right, and then so where is their right to complain about a therapeutic situation anyway?
I definitely hear you there. Though I would say, even with speech therapists, I mean, I went to many speech therapists who didn't, in retrospect, weren't helpful at all. And, but they were doing what, I mean, they weren't committing malpractice. They were doing what they had been taught to do. So there would have been nobody to go hold them accountable for for having zero success with me and so many other folks who stutter. Right. So it's, I'd love to see that third party sort of objective scoring in some way, all the different options, right? Whether it's, Hollins or, um, whatever, there's 50 different programs in the world. And like you said, some of them are run by speech therapists. Some of them are run by folks who stutter. So nowadays, the way it is in the US, from speaking with speech therapists, they're lucky if they get one course when they're in their speech language pathology master's program, one course on stuttering at the most. Some of them get more like a quarter of a course, like a few lectures on it. Most of them don't work with one single person that stutters. They don't have to get their degree, for example. And what ends up happening is they get taught, in many cases, the easy onset, that technique. And they're like, okay, so they work with a person that stutters and they say, okay, we're going to practice our D words now and use an easy onset now. Dog, dinosaur, donut, that sort of thing. And then it's actually, and this was another theme that kept coming up at the recent Friends conference in Denver, was in many cases, that's probably doing more harm to the person that stutters than help. So it's violating rule number 1 of the Hippocratic Oath, which is do no harm. Because the person that stutters is taught this technique, and then it's sort of implied that if you just practice it, if you just go out and do it, if you just go out and use it, the technique should work for you, right? That's the implication I got when I was a kid, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old in speech therapy. And so I then would walk out of the room and I'd try to use it and it wouldn't work. So I'd say, oh God, I am such a loser. This technique that the professional, that the adult is telling me should work, doesn't work. What does that say about me, right? Meanwhile, I didn't realize that it wasn't working for Stephen Greene either, or for this child, or for that, like it wasn't working for hardly anybody in the world, but the speech therapists weren't telling you that. And again, I'm not, like you mentioned, there are a select few that know what they're doing with stuttering in the world, but the vast majority, I think, at the very least, they're just not helping. And at the worst, in many cases, they're actually doing harm because they're deepening the iceberg. You feel even more like a loser when the technique that is supposed to work isn't working, So I think, I just would love to see a sort of an evolution here where we get to the point where we're like, look, anybody that's legitimately helping people that stutter, is welcome. But how do you figure out who's legitimately helping and who's not? I think you got to have an objective way to do that. But a lot of these programs would have to submit. To, working with researchers. And I think a lot of them like their claims that they're helping, 70, 80, 90% of people that we work with, we're helping a lot. I think they like to be able to just, say that, not have it ever be peer reviewed and published. And meanwhile, their business model rolls on. They're making money, they're charging, they're getting people to do it. They'd probably rather not upset the the status quo is my guess.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe the way the advocacy movement can move forward for stuttering is being able to highlight more of these issues, like, you know. So and I think there's been some really good work being done in around the advocacy for stuttering, but I think there's a lot more that needs to happen, and even there has to be more of an opportunity for these conversations just to happen, just in relation to where are we going with the whole stuttering thing anyway, you know. So and I hope that that can happen, like, and I am quite, look, I am a positive person just by nature anyway, and even just seeing the stuff that the stuttering therapy resources are offering to SLPs and everything, it is kind of very promising that the information then that they are sending out and so on, that people have access to. But I think as people who stutter and looking at the Facebook groups and so on, I think there needs to be a shift in the conversation on, now, obviously, look, there will always be a place for maybe the conversations that are happening at the moment, but there needs to be a shift into where are we moving forward with the stuttering movement, and obviously then this needs to be spread out to the likes of the national conferences and so on. So, and I'm actually hoping to see what's going to come up at our national conference here, just in Ireland also. So look, I think I am positive, but I think there's loads of work that needs to be done in this field also anyway.
I agree 100%. And I'm positive also. I mean, there's, you know, like you said, people like Scott Yaris with his stuttering therapy resources, you know, which is geared towards educating SLPs on how to, you know, what I would say, stop doing harm to people that stutter, and hopefully even start helping them. And then with Yuri Schneider also is running like an SLP workshop for folks who stutter. You know, that's all very useful, and, you know, and SLPs obviously need to take the initiative themselves also, and like, don't just work with people that stutter because they come into your office and they're willing to pay you. Actually put in the time to understand and to basically learn that you don't know how to fix them. You don't know how to fix their above the surface of the iceberg stuttering. And so you're going to get much more success in terms of helping them in their life from focusing on the below the surface stuff, which oftentimes, as we said, will sometimes penetrate above the surface as well. But, you know, being humble about it and realizing that you can't just teach them a technique and send them on their merry way to use that technique, you know?
Yeah. And also, I think, look, maybe it's a conversation for another day, Michael, but I think stuttering coaches, maybe it's quite an interesting thing as well, because it's like, okay, where do we go with the whole stuttering coaching thing? Because personally, I think that peer support is so valuable to people who stutter and so on. And I have no problem if somebody has maybe, like, so when it comes to coaching, maybe somebody has a degree in coaching, and then that they have that to kind of back them up. But they are dealing with stuttering, and it's such a multifaceted thing. And because I think there's some stuttering coaches that are out there, and basically, if you ask them, okay, so what's your qualification to deal with stuttering. It's basically, well, I have stuttered my whole life, and then I'm like, oh, okay, so how does your situation equate to somebody else's situation when it comes to stuttering? And I think it just comes back to, are they going to do harm, or like how can we balance that anyway? So,
Absolutely.
sorry, apologies for going off on a tangent here, but I guess so.
No, it's interesting stuff. I think, I think the future of the stuttering world is fascinating, and I think it's, especially coming off that whatever 30 or 40-year period when so many speech therapists were just focused on fluency. I think it's ripe for a change and a revolution, and and something else is the pandemic has really changed stuttering support for the better. I mean, obviously, it was tough for a lot of people because, being cooped up in their house, a lot of us folks that stutter, we weren't sort of forced out there into the world to have as many conversations, which is generally good for us, to have to be pushing out of the comfort zone. So that made it challenging for a lot of folks who stutter, I think, over the pandemic. But as far as the explosion of support, online sort of meetings, and I don't see that going away after the pandemic. I think that's probably here to stay. Because before the pandemic, say in the United States, if you lived in Utah, for example, or you lived in Hawaii, they had zero chapters of the NSA in those states. So there was, now maybe they had, some other local version in some cases, but for the most part, many people had no support groups within, say, a 1 hour drive of where they live. And obviously with Zoom, you can have support groups with people from around the world really easily. And as you mentioned, and as I've experienced and seen, just being around others that stutter, there's something powerful about it to realize that, I think it's probably a variety of things, but you realize stuttering doesn't have to ruin your life. You realize that how you have felt about it is actually the normal way of reacting. You're not a weirdo for feeling ashamed and embarrassed and all that. And you just see other folks that stutter and you're like, no, I like, Stephen, I like my stuttering friends every bit as much as my non-stuttering friends. Maybe this stutter actually doesn't make me unlovable and unlikable and all that kind of stuff.
But even Michael, even just when one of your previous guests there, Chris Constantino, he talked about how our stuttering and the vulnerability, it really opens up a lot of stuff, like opens up conversations that you mightn't have if you were a so-called fluent speaker, and it's people coming to that the kind of realization, then that being able to show your true or authentic self, it is massive, it is huge, and really forms a lot of relationships just moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. As I said to Chris, I think on that episode, I've experienced that when your thing is, sort of that obvious and you're just saying what you want to say anyway, and, the stutter is out there. I experienced that, especially with eye contact and, being a straight shooter, not avoiding anything, that sort of thing, that people actually trusted me. Like there was a level of trust that came faster than when you're just sort of, you might just be another, smooth talking, slick guy sort of thing,
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Michael, actually, I probably have to go and pick up my wife now, just from my work. But can I just say thank you very much for having me on? I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, anyway. So.
Likewise, Stephen. There any last thoughts that you have? One question I sometimes ask people is if you could talk to yourself at, say, 10 years old, or in your case, maybe right before like in your late teens, early 20s, before the iceberg really formed real deep and dark, what would be your sort of concise thing you would say to yourself if you could speak to your younger self?
I would say things will work out, like, and even though you will go through struggles, you will appreciate the light a lot better, so in order to appreciate the light, I think we really need to experience some kind of dark phases also. So actually, yeah, I don't know. So yeah.
Well said, man. And I very much appreciate you joining us, Stephen. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
William, Michael, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye for now.